Think about the last time you were out in a forest, or even just a quiet park. You probably thought it was peaceful, right? Silent. Well, what if I told you that silence is an illusion? That it's actually hiding a secret world of, well, sound. Today, we're going to uncover the startling science that suggests the plant kingdom has a hidden and, believe it or not, a surprisingly loud life of its own. So, let me just start with this question. It's a little out there. What if plants could scream? I know, it sounds like something straight out of a horror movie. But recent research is making us rethink, well, pretty much everything we thought we knew about our green, leafy neighbors. And this is where it gets really wild. Researchers at Tel Aviv University actually recorded plants making these distinct sounds. And we're not talking about faint little whispers. They're described as clicks, almost like popcorn popping, and they're being emitted at about the same volume as you and I are talking right now. So let's dig into this. What are these secret sounds of plants, and what on earth could they actually mean? Okay, so you're probably wondering, if they're as loud as human speech, how come we can't hear them? Well, it all comes down to frequency. Our hearing, it kind of tops out around 16 kilohertz. But these plant sounds, they're way up in the ultrasonic range. We're talking 40 to 80 kilohertz. So while they're totally silent to us, you can bet that creatures like bats, mice, and a whole bunch of insects can almost certainly hear them loud and clear. But here's the crucial part. When are they making these noises? The answer is pretty staggering. A happy, healthy plant is basically silent. It makes like less than one sound per hour. But you take that same plant and you dehydrate it or you cut its stem, suddenly it starts popping off dozens of sounds every single hour. These aren't just random noises, they're distress signals. And this is where it all starts to feel like science fiction becoming reality. Scientists are now feeding these recordings into AI algorithms. And get this, the AI can already tell the difference between a tomato plant and a tobacco plant, and it can even identify what kind of stress it's under, whether it's thirsty or injured, with about 70% accuracy. I mean, can you imagine a future where farmers have sensors that just listen to their fields to know exactly when the crops need water? It's incredible. But look, a plant's ability to sense and react to what's going on around it, it goes way, way beyond just making sounds. This is just the tip of the iceberg. So let's dive into the next section, because this builds a much bigger picture of a truly complex inner world. It turns out plants have a whole array of senses. For example, they can literally hear the specific vibrations of a caterpillar chewing on their leaves and start pumping out chemical defenses. They can smell airborne warning signals from other nearby plants that are being attacked. They even have proprioception, which is basically a sense of where their own branches and leaves are in space. And their version of sight, it is way more complex than ours. We have four types of photoreceptors. They have at least 11. And that's because for a plant, light isn't just for seeing, light is their food. All of this led plant scientist Jack Schultz to say something that'll really make you think. He said that after studying them for decades, he's concluded that plants are just very slow animals. I mean, think about it. They fight for territory, they search for food, they evade predators, they even trap prey. They're doing all the same things animals do, just on a time scale that's so slow we can't really perceive it without a time-lapse camera. So this complex world of senses, it leads to an even deeper question. If a plant can perceive stress, can it also remember it? Let's get into the absolutely fascinating idea of plant memory. Now, when scientists talk about memory in plants, let's be clear, they're not suggesting a plant is thinking about its childhood. They use a very specific term, stress imprint. What this means is that a plant undergoes a real physical change at the biochemical or even genetic level that prepares it to respond differently if it faces that same threat again. And you can actually see what this looks like. On this chart, that dashed line shows how a normal plant responds to a threat. But the solid line, that's a primed plant, one that's been through this before. The second time it faces that stress, its defensive response is way faster and much, much stronger. It has, for all intents and purposes, learned from its past experience. So how in the world are they storing this information? Well, researchers have a couple of leading ideas. One is for short-term memory. The plant basically builds up a stockpile of inactive signaling proteins, so they're ready to go at a moment's notice. The other idea is for long-term memory, and it involves something called epigenetic changes. You can think of these like little sticky notes that get placed on the DNA, telling the plant how to read its own genetic instructions differently without actually rewriting the code itself. Okay, and just when you think it can't get any wilder, it does. This memory isn't just for that one plant. It can be passed down to its children. Studies have actually shown that the offspring of a plant that went through a drought can be born more resilient to that exact same threat. It is a form of transgenerational memory. It's wild. So we have sound, we have senses, we have memory, and all of this inevitably leads us to the most controversial topic in this entire field, the debate over plant intelligence. Some scientists even call this field plant neurobiology. Now, this is not some new fringe idea. It actually goes all the way back to Charlie Darwin, who was completely obsessed with plant movement. Then, in the early 1900s, a scientist named J.C. Bose did incredible work on their electrical signals. But then, for decades, the whole idea just fell out of fashion. It wasn't until the early 2000s that the field was sort of reborn, and it sparked this fiery, passionate debate that's still going on today. And let's just hang on this quote from Darwin for a second. After carefully studying the tips of plant roots, he wrote that the root tip acts like the brain of one of the lower animals, directing the rest of the plant. I mean, coming from the father of evolutionary theory, that is a pretty powerful statement. And modern science has found some, well, pretty shocking parallels. When a leaf gets damaged, for instance, it sends an electrical wave across the entire plant. The molecule that kicks off this signal, it's glutamate. That is the exact same molecule that works as a crucial neurotransmitter in your brain and my brain. Now, let's be super clear here. Plants do not have neurons. They don't have brains, but they are using the same molecular toolkit to build their own very sophisticated communication network. So what do we do with all this? How is this supposed to change the way we see the green world all around us? Let's try to pull all this together and form a new perspective. I think the biggest mistake we often make is judging plants by animal standards. And that totally misses the point. They are not trying to be animals. They are absolute masters of a completely different way of life, a rooted existence. And every single one of these incredible abilities we've talked about is perfectly adapted for that reality. There's this quote from a great book called What a Plant Knows that just nails this idea perfectly. It says, "For a plant, light is not just a signal, light is food." Think about that. For us, light is just a signal. For them, it's also dinner. That one fundamental difference shapes their entire sensory world, and it explains why their version of sight had to become so much more complex than our own. And that brings us right back around to where we started. That peaceful looking field of flowers, it's actually a buzzing, noisy, chaotic place full of communication and reaction. It's a whole world of signals about drought and injuries and predators, all happening on a frequency just outside the range of our hearing. So I'll just leave you with this final thought to chew on. If we could build the right tools, if we could really tune into their frequency and understand their chemical language, what incredible stories are the plants in your own backyard trying to tell us right at this very moment?